Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, and how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Hi, welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I'm Dustin Pickering, your host. We have Carlo Parcelli with us today, as usual, as our co-host. And we're going to discuss the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the media narrative. So what is the media narrative, Carlo? Tell us a little bit about what's being said and what's not being said. As we know, the media presents its one-sided political perspective.
Well, actually, I'm going to let an article I discovered in Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting do a lot of the talking for me. The article is an excellent one. It's called What's Missing from Corporate Media's Ukraine Coverage, and it's by Bryce Green, a young man who apparently is still a student somewhere. But this appears in a recent issue of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, and he opens with as tensions begin to rise over Ukraine, U.S. media produced a stream of articles attempting to explain the situation with headlines like Ukraine Explained in the New York Times and What You Need to Know About Tensions Between Ukraine and Russia in the Washington Post. Sidebars would have notes that tried to provide context for the current headlines. But to truly understand this crisis, you need to know much more than what appeared in these articles. And he has it broken down into headings. The West wants investor-friendly policies in Ukraine, and as he points out, the backdrop to the 2014 coup and annexation cannot be understood without looking at the strategy to open Ukrainian markets to foreign investors and give control of its economy to giant multinational corporations. And of course, when he talks about a 2014 coup, which is not largely mentioned in the mainstream media, it's hard to believe. There was a coup in Ukraine in 2014 that was led by the United States. It was fostered and supported financially by the U.S. and hundreds of NGOs that the U.S. intelligence, U.S. State Department controls, and there's phone evidence of the ambassador from the U.S. to the Ukraine at the time, Victoria Nuland, talking literally to the State Department back here in Washington about who they preferred putting in power after they overthrew Yanukovych, who was a duly elected representative of president of Ukraine, another elected government, another democratic exchange that the U.S. went in and fucked over. So, and what Yanukovych was doing was he was rejecting overtures from Western Europe and the United States economic gestures from them, alliances, and leaning toward Russia, which was willing to give him a better deal, a better exchange for for his efforts. So that in this first paragraph, the West wants investor-friendly policies in Ukraine. You better believe it. The other thing that they want investor-friendly is they want to be able to continue to control the market in liquid natural gas and natural gas in general flowing to Western Europe because of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is ready to go online. It would circumvent Ukraine. It would take billions of dollars that Ukraine collects in fees and deny them to Ukraine, and would also deny the U.S. one of its major markets, Europe, for natural gas, where Europeans pay 4 times what they'll have to pay when the Nord Stream 2 gas line goes in, and circumvents Ukraine. So, yeah, there's big money involved here. A young man writes in the article, a key tool for this has been the International Monetary Fund, which leverages aid loans to push governments to adopt policies friendly to investors. And let's stop there. What are those policies? Lower wages, do away with socialized medicine, healthcare, do away with infrastructure for the people, raise their taxes. That's what foreign investors want. They want it investor friendly so their return is larger. And the less money the people make, the less social services they get, the more money goes to Western corporations. This is just all just de rigueur for the IMF and the World Bank. This is what they do. It's called austerity. It's utterly crippled so many countries. I couldn't even begin, In fact, it's crippled virtually every country in Southern Europe right now, from Greece all the way to Portugal. So let's just move on to the second heading. Actually, wait a minute. Let's stop here. Let's read this paragraph. In Ukraine, the IMF had long planned to implement a series of economic reforms to make the country more attractive to investors. These included cutting wage controls, for example, lowering wages, reforming and reducing health and education sectors, which made up the bulk of employment in Ukraine, and cutting natural gas subsidies to Ukrainian citizens that made energy affordable to the general public. Coup plotters like U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, the aforementioned Victoria Nuland, repeatedly stressed the need for the Ukrainian government to enact necessary, that's in quotes, reforms. In other words, starve the Ukrainians. How stupid do the Ukrainians have to be? I know. I used to have another kind of a long blog before these things existed 30 years ago, and I warned the Ukrainians about going with the West. I said they will fuck you over, and they're trying. They have. Ukraine is now the poorest country in Eastern Europe, poorer than Moldavia, the poorest country. Fuck it. So anyway, let's move on here. Second heading. Well, let me stop here. Dustin, do you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
Well, I would like to mention that when that ongoing thing with the Crimea was going on, I remember reading that one of the conflicts of interest was that the Ukrainians had a debt to Russia due to them loaning them gas and oil at the time. And basically that was one of the sources of the conflict with, and then why Russia was moving in on them and one of the reasons they were having that discussion was that some of the Ukrainians wanted to go to the West and some wanted to go to the Russian side. And Russia said, well, if you annex, then we will forgive your debt. And Western side, represented by the European Union, said, if you don't annex and come to us, then we will pay off that debt, or we'll help pay off that debt. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't recall hearing much about that. I do know that there was a referendum held in Crimea, and 95% of the people voted to go back to Russia.
Right.
And the historical fact about Crimea is prior to 1955, it was part of Russia. It was Khrushchev that, I guess, in a fit of enthusiasm, just basically turned the Crimea over to Ukraine, never imagining that the Soviet Union would break up, I guess. Now, the really critical part, the real critical nature of Crimea is that they have a major freshwater port in Sebastopol, and it's really the only freshwater port that the Russians have in the world. Oddly, if you look at the map of Russia, it's largely landlocked for access to navigable waters. I mean, they have waters on the Pacific opposite of Japan and that sort of thing, but Sebastopol is really essential. Now, the U.S. wanted to turn it into yet another U.S. base, and the U.S. is already surrounded. They've utterly surrounded Russia on all sides, and especially on the former East European side. So Russia's concerned about Crimea was just simply not allowing the U.S. another base of operations just off of their border. So I don't know about. I'm really not really familiar with what you brought up. I'm really not versed in that. So, but anyway, that's it.
Right. We had a message from Francesca Caluzzo that disappeared off the screen. It was on for just a second. Can we bring that back up, and I'll read it?
Yeah.
Just bring that comment back up. Please, I speak personally to the world as an Italian and European citizen. Nobody has asked neither NATO nor the U.S. to send soldiers to these parts. Let us Europeans take care of things ourselves. As long as Russia does not attack Ukraine, we do not need troops sent to Europe in advance by the U.S. Leave this choice to Ukraine. The Ukrainian president himself told Joe Biden he was aware of the situation much more than the latter did. But what do we want to play the to show the? Is there a comment furthering that to show the? And then there's a we call it an ellipsis there. But what do we want to play to show the? I think there's an additional portion of the comment that's not shown because of the length. There must be something it just says at the end, but what do we want to play to show the, and then there's an ellipsis. So if we can bring the rest of that comment up, maybe show the latter half of that. It does say it's too long. I don't have the full comment, but I totally agree. I mean, there's a tendency for the U.S. to jump in a lot of these conflicts, and our interests are obviously involved to this portion of the conflict. When there's conflicts, we always want to try to play the conflict resolution game, and it's always about the economy, cheaper gas, so forth, things like that, placate the citizens and keep them quiet, and so we can do what we do best, which is ram the people and so forth, and make a lot of money doing it and gain a lot of power. I think it's mostly about power myself, more so than the money. The money is the power construct. It's used as a way of maintaining and balancing that power to a certain extent. And I think that's probably what the interest in money is. I don't think it has anything to do with it's an abstraction. It doesn't really have any real value other than what we give it. And so the accumulation of money is about the power, in my opinion, and the manipulation and the game, playing the game of the political game of screwing people over and wrecking things, and just the fun that they must be having of playing chess with the world stage. That's my opinion. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree with the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Zelensky has said, the current president of Ukraine Zelensky has said over and over again that there's no threat of a Russian invasion. This is all bogus. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and this brings us to it's really the Americans. It's really
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Slimy. It's really the U.S. that's pushing for this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, you can see it in the heading of our show. Are Americans stupid enough to be allied into another war? And there's a lot to be said about along those lines. I mean, they were stupid enough to believe the Gulf of Tonkin, both Gulf wars. They were also stupid enough to believe in WMD and that kind of idiocy. So, and this brings me to something I wanted to bring up that I came to
Yes.
rather late in my preparation for the show.
Right. We got the rest
Yeah.
of Franco's comment.
Okay.
What do we want to play to show the muscles? Any interference by foreign states in a country's internal affairs has proved devastating so far. As if Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, etc. weren't enough, the list is so long and full of devastation and deaths that I prefer to stop and not go beyond measure. Leave only the path of diplomacy open if you really want to avoid World War III. Totally agree with that. We should not be involved in, and we should not be stirring conflicts. And our media organizations are definitely involved heavily with our DC comrades, if we can call them that. I'd say that tongue in cheek.
Well, it takes us back to the old PNAC, the manifesto, the 87-page manifesto, and the purpose of Libya and Syria was to destabilize the Middle East. It's right there. It's the kind of throw the deck of cards up in the air and see where they fall and try to increase your power base that way. The thing with the situation with Russia now is far more serious. I mean,
Right.
Russia is a real world power, and China is really an ally a quiet ally of Russia right now.
Right.
But to go back to the point that of Zelensky, he's telling Biden and his people they don't want war. The problem is there's a lot to unload here. But the fact of the matter is Americans are on all fronts are stupid. We had the situation with Russiagate. That was pure bullshit.
We're kept stupid. We're not told. We're told half the truth, if any of the truth.
Yeah, well, I mean, but there comes a time where you have to become me. You have to go. No, this is too dumb. Now, I will say, you and I kibitz about Steve Bannon a lot, and I find him he's an interesting character. Yeah. I'm sure Blinken, Biden's Secretary of State, thinks that if they go to war, like the American people always do, they'll get behind the federal government. Well, I got news for him. One man, Steve Bannon, has single-handedly devised a way to get all the blue-collar guys that used to do the 2 and 3 tours and have their private businesses destroyed for blind patriotism. They're not on Blinken's side. They don't give a rat's rectum about Biden. They've had it, and that all it took was people like Steve Bannon and Bannon himself taking the anti-war rhetoric of the left, the imperialist rhetoric of the left, and translating it to an anti-imperialist rhetoric of the right.
Absolutely.
And they're not going to have those people behind them anymore. They are not going to have them behind them anymore. And so this is even more stupid on the part of Biden and Blinken and Newland and Kagan and Samantha Powers, and all those warmongers who have never, ever been in the military, gone on a military adventure in their own lives. Just
we need to remember that too. These guys don't know war. I mean, at least when we had Eisenhower, who spoke against war, at least he was a general. I mean, we know that at least he knew the horrors of war, and he gave us a nice rhetoric against war. And thank you again, Franca. Thank you for reading my complete message, dear Dustin Pickering. I am really worried. I am only for diplomacy, not for anticipation of war. Absolutely, it's devastating.
Thank you, Franca, for your very informed and wonderful comments.
I think a lot of people think especially some of the views of the far left, that we just hate the United States, and that's not really true. It's more true that the United States represents a global power structure that the capitalist power structure that a lot of the left is just absolutely can't stand because of these kinds of dynamics, the manipulative game that's being played. I think it is a very important fundamental question. While the American President Biden is at an all-time low of his internal consensus, he reflexes his muscles, further devastating a Europe that, among other things, depends almost exclusively, Italy 90%, of Russian gas. Energy is fundamental to our economy more than the grievance of the muscles that, unfortunately, every military intervention demonstrates. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, yes, true. And Biden thinks, like any president would normally think, that if he puts the United States in a war posture, which it's actually been in for its entire existence, that the people will get behind him. But it's not.
I think we're all getting sick of it. We're getting sick of it. Yeah, it's a waste of our resources.
Doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. I mean, it does. Look, one of my favorite things to do, like I've said, is to read the comments section of Breitbart and of the Fox News people and the Washington Post and the New York Times and all these. I love reading the comments. Now, there are a lot of stupid comments on the Washington Post about they bought the party line again. It's just like WMD in Iraq. It just they don't get it. They don't understand it. It's like history started yesterday. It's what Theodore Adorno called an ahistorical rationalism. So they just take whatever was in the article, and that becomes the entire template for their rational response. So if the New York Times puts a bunch of lies in there, that becomes the rational template for their response. It doesn't mean it's true in any way, shape, or form. But it's still rational. That's the great limitation of Enlightenment reason. Let's not go into that. But
it's a different conversation.
but here, in this article that I've drawn down on, one of the headlines is Washington used Nazis to help overthrow the government. Now, this is important because this is where Bannon lives. Bannon is friends with those Nazis. So you have the right wingers there, the Nazis there, and you have the Nazis here. This is Bannon's base of operations. So it reads, the Washington-backed opposition, the top of the government, was fueled by far-right and openly Nazi elements like the right sector. One far-right group that grew out of the protests was the Azov Battalion, a paramilitary militia of neo-Nazi extremists. Their leaders made up the vanguard of the anti-Yanukovych protests and even spoke at opposition events in the Maidan alongside U.S. regime change advocates like McCain and Newland. And then after the violent coup, these groups were later incorporated into the Ukrainian armed forces, the same armed forces that the U.S. has now given $2.5 billion. Now, that's important. That's important because these guys want to go to war with Russia. They want to. They're ultra-nationalists. They're from the Stepan Bandera era of of shaking hands with Adolf Hitler, photographs after photographs. They're stone cold, anti-Semitic, racist Nazis. I mean, forget it. And that element exists and is very powerful in this country. Don't minimize it. Trump showed just how much anti-Semitism and racism is. If there's no taste for these guys going to Ukraine, there certainly is a taste for them allying with these Nazis. And I think that's a fundamental error because let's face it, that coup took place during the Obama administration, and Biden was there. He was vice president, and so was Hillary Clinton, and they gave it their blessing. So they're not above working with Nazis. They're not above it, but they think they can control it. It's like these asshole anti-COVID people who now have courted, by being anti-COVID, have courted all these Nazis who now sign up, are far-right people. Let's be fair, not all of them are Nazis. Far-right people onto their podcasts, and they think they have no idea what they're unleashing. So you have this huge trucker. I'm getting a little off topic here, but you got this huge trucker convoy in Canada, and they've got swastikas and Nazi flags on their trucks, so this one podcast guy, Jimmy Dore, at first he has a podcast where he's just praising these anti-vax truckers. These anti-vax truckers, they're not getting vaxxed. Then it turns out they're waving Nazi flags and they have swastikas all over his truck, so he has to take his fucking podcast down. What a fucking idiot. He thinks he can control that? He's insane. And that's the problem that exists in the Ukraine. If they've got the Azov battalion in their regular army, then anything can happen. They could be set off at any minute because those people want war. And just like the Nazis here, the right element here wants war. So I would suggest to the Blinkens and the Bidens of the world, they stop courting Nazis. They stop sending Nazis weaponry. These fuckers, I don't know why they're in power. They're too stupid. They're as stupid as Trump is from their own point of view and perspective. Trump had nothing on them as far as stupidity goes. So I suggest they stop right now. But anyway, this article quite nicely covers if you get a chance to read it, quite nicely covers the Nazis involved in Ukraine and involved in the 2014 coup. And another thing I should mention is the Nazis are intimidating their own people, just like in Venezuela, where the right went and shot its own demonstrators. That's what the Maidan Nazis did in Ukraine. There were legitimate anti-Yanukovych demonstrators. When they went out in the streets, the Nazis shot them and tried to blame it on the Yanukovych people. Same tactic. This is a classic CIA tactic. The same tactic was used in Venezuela. It's been used all over the world. You get these gullible people. Oh, you got America come in, yeah. And then the right wing people that the CIA backs, they have snipers and they gun down the demonstrators that are supposedly on the U.S. side, and then they try to blame it on the people they're trying to topple. Classic bullshit. Okay, let's move on. There's a lot more to the Crimean annexation. Well, I've explained that already. Let's see the way he words it. The Crimean Peninsula, which was part of Russia until it was transferred to the Ukrainian Soviet Republic in 1954, is home to one of 2 Russian naval bases. Well, he's got 2, and that's more thorough than I am, with access to the Black and Mediterranean Seas, one of the history's most important maritime theaters. A Crimea controlled by a U.S.-backed Ukrainian government was a major threat to Russian naval access. Okay. Then he goes on. The U.S. wants to expand NATO. This is one of the central things. A little history, a little background. When Gorbachev, that career idiot, was negotiating with the West to basically dismantle the Soviet Union, he was assured by James Baker and other U.S. officials and by 12 European countries, some of them in writing, that NATO would not advance 1 inch beyond where it had gone at that time in the 1988. I think it's 88. 1988. Not 1 inch. Now it's right up against the Russian borders. So, of course, the Russians, I mean, Gorbachev, how gullible was that guy? I have 4-year-olds that I've met are less gullible than Gorbachev. So he got took. They lied to him. The West always lies. It's just a bunch of wealthy oligarchic freaks, which brings us to the Russian oligarchy, which was basically established under Boris Yeltsin, the drunk that U.S. New York public relations firms put into power. The Russian people didn't put him into power. The former Soviets didn't put him into power. It was Russian. It was New York public relations firms behind him, promoting him as Russia's great hope that put him into power. And of course, he turned out to be the oligarchs' great hope, and he turned out to be U.S. investors' great hope and European investors' great hope. That's who he is. So if you want to talk about current oligarchs and sanctioning them, you're basically sanctioning your buddies, you fools. So that one doesn't need any more elaboration. That should be common knowledge in kindergartens, for Christ's sake. Let's see, what's he got here? The U.S. wouldn't tolerate what Russia is expected to accept. Of course it wouldn't. Oh, my God. How many people have pointed out, look, what if Canada and Mexico were to join up, one of the alliances with Russia or China? And that, what if Mexico was to sign a huge contract with the Chinese for the Belt and Road Initiative, all these different infrastructure programs? There'd be hell to pay.
Franca has another comment.
Yeah.
My father, Giovanni Caluzzo, an officer of the Italian Navy, was captured by the Nazis after the armistice of September 8, 1943, because he did not want to continue to fight for the Republic of Salo. That's why I am double against Nazism. My father died for emphysema.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because, I have relatives too.
After many months in different Nazi camps, he was freed from the Russians, but died prematurely in Italy due to lung emphysema, following the suffering suffered in concentration camps and the frost, etc. Only a year ago, he had the medal and memory that I managed, thanks to the help of a dear friend, to let him get from the President of the Italian Republic. This poem of mine represents my tribute to him and to all the victims of human folly. We need to change the system. It seems Nazism is still among us, people of hope and freedom. Mirna Calderon says, this is scary. I'm not sure if her comment is in reference to what we're saying or in reference to the situation. I wish she could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, both.
But
the answer is both. It's very scary.
It is.
It is.
It can be frightening. The whole reality can be very frightening. I mean, especially when it comes to the political situations and all the power games and the money involved, and the sociopaths and psychopaths that run things all over the world and run over people in general. She says the situation is scary. Mirna Calderon, thank you so much for your comments.
Yeah.
So, this is something breathtaking. It's just very worrisome, definitely. So, what do you have to add to what you've already said, Carlo?
Well, I want to read a little more from this article. Let me just read from the section called "The Memory Hole." All of this missing context allows hawks to promote disastrous escalation of tensions. The Wall Street Journal published an opinion piece trying to convince readers there was a, quote, strategic advantage to risking war in Ukraine. The piece by John Denny of the U.S. Army War College summarized the familiar hawkish talking points and claimed that a neutral Ukraine is anathema to Western values of national self-determination and sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
In a modern rendition of Zbigniew Brzezinski's Afghan Trap, Denny asserted that war in Ukraine could actually serve U.S. interests in weakening Russia. Such a war, however disastrous, would, quote, forge an even stronger anti-Russian consensus across Europe, refocusing NATO against the main enemy, result in quote, economic sanctions that would further weaken Russia's economy and, quote, sap the strength and the morale of Russia's military while undercutting Mr. Putin's domestic popularity, end quote. Thus, escalating tensions is a win-win for Washington.
We're going to take a brief break, but we'll come right back with your analysis of those comments. Thank you, Carla, for reading that.
Sure.
Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, and how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Having war for peace is like fucking for virginity. Let's let Karl give us an analysis of this situation further. As he commented before the program, he read extensively from a document. Let's have his thoughts on the situation in Ukraine and the Russian experiment here with the media, as we have the media gearing up to tell us we need to go to war. What is the alternative? What kind of alternatives do we have? Do we have why don't we just stay here and mind our own business? That seems like an alternative.
Well, actually, the last paragraph I read by quoting this insane, warmongering think tank idiot. I mean, it's obviously we need more sanatoriums for these people. We gotta start. We call them psychopaths. We call them sociopaths. They're clinical. Those remarks were clinical. There was nothing that made any real sense in that remark. I was trying to find a nice little pithy,
heavily embedded with linguistic what do you call it, subterfuge. I mean, you can read through the lines without much trouble.
Well, I mean, it's not even a matter of reading through the lines. It's
Right.
like
It's pretty
it's
obvious.
it's like
A
it
good reader.
it made no sense. I mean, first
Right.
of all, why is Russia the enemy? I
Right.
mean, it's not even the Soviet Union anymore. They used to make, when I was a kid,
Mhm.
they were the commies.
Right.
There's all this red baiting. We hid under our desks, all this bullshit. Now it's like David. It's like what was not David Lovett? Well, he was in the PR branch of the Truman administration, and I don't think he went into the Eisenhower administration, but he said I'll paraphrase, if we can convince the American people um, of the threat of a Soviet something or other, we could sell them anything, because he came out of Madison Avenue. He was a Madison Avenue ad man, and that was his job, was to convince the American public that there was a threat, so that he could make all of these arms merchants and all of these weapons, Westinghouse and all these huge corporations that were making nuclear weapons, wealthier than they already were.
Mhm.
Woo-hoo! Woo, let's get the money, like you said. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is somebody said a quote along that was very funny. I put it up on my Facebook page, which of course I can't find right now, but it says something to the effect of, so 400 people can refurbish their bathrooms in Northern Virginia. We're going to war with Russia. And that's true, because what he's talking about is where I live. I live right outside Washington, D.C. He's
Mhm.
talking about the Beltway bandits. He's talking about the military industrial complex that you just cited. Eisenhower warned us against very famously. We could call it up and do it verbatim. It's on the internet 1,000 times. These people will lead you into unnecessary war and get your children killed. What happens immediately after Eisenhower? The CIA blows Kennedy's head off. Johnson sends uh, 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 hundreds of thousands of troops to Vietnam. 5 million people die. They tried to get me. They tried to kill me. It didn't work out. Here I am. But uh, but that's the way it is. It's just so pathetically obvious, and that's the thing about psychopaths. They're not subtle, and they're clinical. So we have to deal with them at a clinical level. I don't know what else. I don't know. I don't know if there's any other things. But well, of course, the psychopaths have the power, so it's not
Right.
likely that we're going to be in a position to to um to do what I'm suggesting we do. But I mean, it's
Absolutely. And that's
we're
always the
we're
question
at
is
the
the
mercy of these
solutions.
people, and these people are crazy. That statement in a major newspaper, the New York Times, was 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 certifiable. It's straitjacket stuff, and he's got the major media behind him, and it results in this. As a result of this coverage, this is the Times and the Post that's got the kids talking about here. The interventionist mentality has trickled down to the public. One poll found, should Russia actually invade Ukraine, 50% of Americans support embroiling the U.S. in yet another quagmire, up from just 30% in 2014. So, they're going to get, if if it comes to being lied to again, they'll swing with it. It won't take an invasion. It'll just take lies. I mean, look at the first Gulf War. First Gulf War. Um, April Glaspie uh, uh, was in the embassy to Baghdad. She assured Saddam Hussein if he invaded Kuwait, the United States would not step in. She had that straight from the White House, which I'm sure she did. I don't think she was making that up. Straight from Congress, we would not step in. Saddam Hussein had legitimate concerns about Kuwait. Go in. He goes in. Oh no, we never said that. Let's invade. Why? To steal Iraq's oil. It's as simple as that. Back to your money thing.
Mm-hmm.
But people are somewhat somewhat wise to the WMD, the second Iraq War. That was so blatantly stupid
Mm-hmm.
and ham-fisted on the part of the psychopaths that generally people picked up on it. But the first one, I'm still finding people, they don't even remember it happened, much less what it was intended to do. And it did not succeed in what it intended to do because the situation on the ground was far more complex than Washington anticipated, or their corporate handlers anticipated, or the Pentagon anticipated. And I'll throw out one word: that's Kurds. They didn't anticipate that that the situation would get dire as far as the Kurds were concerned, because Saddam Hussein would see that as a green light to solidify his power over the Kurds, which, for very complex reasons we can't go into now, was untenable to U.S. foreign policy, involving also a NATO power, Turkey. So, anyway, the first Gulf War is probably it's an example of, you don't have to actually have an invasion. You could just sort of create a situation where it looks like, I mean, what would it take for a Nazi, some of the Azov battalion people now in the Ukraine military, to foment a conflict with Russia? It would be like Izzy Stone wrote in The Hidden History of the Korean War. It wasn't the North Koreans or the Chinese that began the Korean War. It
Mm-hmm.
it was phony U.S. incursions using proxy South Korean forces that did it. They provoked they provoked the North into a conflict, and they provoked China eventually into entering into it. It's and now that's been supported by all the documentation that's come out over these many decades, and these thousands of FOIA requests for the information. That's still not all there, of course. Much of it gets destroyed. Uh, uh, I'm trying to recall some of the destruction that's taken place. It's so legend. It's, Iran Contra. So much of that material has been destroyed. But uh, it won't even take an actual conflict. It'll just, when it's like this, when it's 50% of these people are still that stupid and gullible to think that Russia has any intentions of invading, it's concerning. Listen, I was watching. I hate doing this. But I was watching a lot of these pundits that were coming on talking about the Ukraine situation, military people and people from think tanks. And I love Gray Zone, and I very much admire the journalism of Ben Norton and Aaron Mate over there. And Aaron had this retired intelligence guy. No, I think he was. DIA. I think he was Defense Intelligence, and he was predicting, like many other people I saw on television, that the Russia would invade Ukraine before the end of January. And now we hear that what's today's the 3rd of February, and there's been no invasion. So now they've moved it back. Now it's going to happen now in February. That's just how they do. Waiting for something to blow up, and it's all basically to earn money for the U.S. military-industrial complex, which needs to fuel its people and refurbish their bathrooms, and put another sink in. And their wife wants to have the bathroom retiled, so we have to kill thousands of people, if tens of thousands of people across the world. That's literally what's happening. So some wealthy fat cat, and if anybody's coming to Washington, look me up. I'll drive you over there. And you'll be flabbergasted to see the gated communities that these people live in. It's not surprising that around Washington, that the 5 wealthiest communities in the country exist around Washington, not around Los Angeles, not around Chicago, not around New York, not around Boston. The 5 wealthiest counties in the country exist right here around Washington, D.C. What does that tell you? They're stealing millions and millions of dollars from their imperialist ventures, and they're stealing millions and millions of your taxpayer money to fund and to build all these weapons that they get and then they sell to all of these foreign countries to keep them constantly at war, to keep Saudi Arabia murdering innocent people in Yemen, even to keep Joe Biden from killing one of his own ISIS fighters, one of CIA's own ISIS captains, and his children with a drone strike, which is just in the newspaper today. I mean, the ISIS people in Syria were people who were allied with the Central Intelligence Agency. Last time I looked, the Central Intelligence Agency was an American entity. Well, of course, I'm wrong. It's an entity all of its own. It's a country all of its own. If Biden said don't do something to the CIA, they'd fucking do it anyway. So I'm sorry, I'm going on here. Got anything to add, Dustin?
I don't have anything really important to say. I'm just curious what are the alternatives, economically speaking? We have a system that puts the worst at the top, and that puts some of the most vicious and I would say Randian psychopaths at the top. Is there a kind of is there any other alternatives like experimental around the world that we have that could be functional? What we would call like a society. I guess you could call it a utopian vision of sorts that that we could work towards. Because the resistance and so forth is great. Speaking our minds is great, but how do we build from the ground up? I mean, how can we go about living towards that ideal of peace where we don't have to? I guess we just turn off the TV. These media narratives would be a great alternative. That would be something I would consider, just not giving them the benefit. Give them the silence they deserve. return their constant negativity with absolute dead silence. Just don't pay any attention to them, and find something more constructive besides gearing into that anxiety-ridden narrative. I think that would be a start for those of us who are looking for the alternative.
I can't imagine it. I to a certain extent, Chinese foreign policy is looking to the alternative by creating infrastructure. But then, as I was just kibitzing with someone on Luciana Bone's Facebook page, they've gone in and they went into Mali, for example, and I think it was Mali. It could be anywhere in the world. They're trying to build something. They're trying to build a railway across the Sahel, which is the sub-Saharan Africa. And now there's been 5 coups right across where they want to build the railroad, and all the coups have been led by the United States. Well, one technically in Chad was not a coup. The leader of Chad was killed in combat with Boko Haram forces in his north, who are receiving aid and training. That's weapons and training from a Islamic fundamentalist with strong ties to the Central Intelligence Agency. I think he's in southern Morocco. I can't remember the names offhand. So anyway, but they have achieved destabilizing Guinea, Mali, Chad, Niger, and Sudan, right across the southern Sahel. So what they're doing basically, the CIA, is they're throwing a monkey wrench into Chinese good intentions of creating a rail line and a lifeline really for southern Sahel, because it's a lot of it's desert, so it's a huge financial risk on the part of the Chinese, and a lot of it's going down the toilet because the U.S. just simply, they have coups and they pay these guys a few $1,000s, and they take the, like Lumumba, the CIA and their cronies take them out to a field and kill them, and Che Guevara, and they just kill them, and the toadies of the U.S., they work for the U.S. until the U.S. doesn't have a use for them, and then they throw them in the jail like Noriega, or they kill them like Trujillo, or it's just a thing that goes on. So, but the Chinese are trying, and there's a number, and of course I don't want to be too negative about it, because there are a number of places where they're succeeding in providing this infrastructure: schools, hospitals, roads, dams, that sort of thing, fundamental thing, access to fresh water, modern agriculture, bridges, the whole 100 yards. And they are succeeding to a large degree, and they have connections or contracts to well over 100 countries now. So that I see as like an inroad, and while the U.S. just basically goes down the toilet, which it seems to be doing, and pleasantly so, and it's not really lost on Bannon. He can see it going down the toilet, and he wants to turn it into a kind of far-right neo-Nazi paradise, where Stephen Miller, who thought he could play games with Nazis while he worked for Donald Trump, finds himself in a concentration camp ready to be gassed. And that's the kind of thing I think is coming for the U.S. It'll be a pariah state. People of goodwill like you and I will be in some jeopardy. Certainly, people of Jewish descent, African Americans, immigrants of all stripe will be in harm's way, literally in harm's way. I think that's the future of America, and as its hypocritical and useless light that stretches back over 2 centuries flickers out, I hope I'm still around to sit on my front stoop and with a beer with my neighbors and laugh it off. I don't see any other way. I don't see any other way out of it except it just burns itself out. And it seems to be doing that at an alarming rate. Seems to have no concern. So,
well, I hope the future's not so bleak, but I anticipate some of that being enacted to an extent. We're already seeing a lot of trouble in Paradise, as they say, the city on the hill. So this has been an excellent program. Been very exciting and interesting perspectives shared. And I like you said before, Carlo, I don't think we're going to make much of a difference in what goes on, but hopefully people will tune into the program, listen in, and get some ideas they're not hearing from other sources. And just keep watching Parrot TV's programming. This has been the Foreign Policy Review, and I'm Dustin Pickering. My co-host Carlo Parcelli is a very interesting and blunt person. We love to hear his worldview, and we love his perspective on Parrot TV. He'll just tell you like it is, right straight from the horse's mouth. And so watch out for the wonderful words of Carlo. And remember, we have the monthly magazine coming up pretty soon that has an interview with Carlo. So if you're curious about his perspective on literature and publishing, that's something you want to take a look at. It's coming out really quick in the end of the month or beginning of March. That's World Inkers monthly magazine. So you don't want to miss it. Been a wonderful program here at the Foreign Policy Review. Hope you guys out there start educating yourselves outside of the narratives being fed to us on a daily basis here, and the media propaganda machine based out here from DC, straight out of the jungles and swamps of of our political establishment. So, without further ado, I will conclude the program. I hope you guys have an excellent afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today.